What if you were a part of the majority of the population, yet you couldn't open your own bank account, get your own credit card, or choose your own profession? Up until the 1970s, that was true. If you were a girl. Welcome back to A Kid Explains History. In honor of Women's History Month, today we're going to be talking about the modern women's liberation movement. It achieved some amazing things, allowing generations of women to live drastically different lives from their mothers and grandmothers. To put women's lib in context, we first have to look at the word feminism. The Oxford Dictionary defines it as the advocacy of women's rights on the basis of the equality of the sexes. It stems from the Latin word femina, which meant woman, and began being used around the 1850s. Historians generally categorize feminism in 4 phases, or waves. We explored parts of the first wave of feminism in this video, which discussed women's suffrage. Feminism's second wave, aka women's lib, took place in the 1960s and 70s. Now, I'm sure it won't be a shock to you to learn that a woman's role in society was very different in the 1950s than it is today. The right to vote was secured a generation earlier, but they weren't allowed to have a credit card or really make any financial decisions without the approval of a man. In other words, their dad, their husband, or even their brother. And take a moment to think about that. A woman also couldn't get divorced without a watertight reason, though sometimes the men had a little bit more leniency. Women also had a really hard time finding jobs, although they were often employed in professions that were called feminine, so nursing, teaching, and secretarial work. It was kind of impossible to find anything else. That was because if you weren't a man, higher education was quite constricted. On top of that, pay was abysmal, and workplace abuse was commonplace and generally accepted. So how did this all start to change? First of all, books began being published that brought these issues into the mainstream. In 1963, The Feminine Mystique began to deconstruct the romanticism of the 50s housewife. Then came a revolutionary medication called the pill. Approved by the FDA in 1960, it allowed women the option to choose when to start a family, which meant that many women postponed getting married in exchange for a career. It's hard to overstate the mindset change that this caused. Huge shifts were already taking place in the 1960s in American society, when it came to civil rights or even opposition to the Vietnam War. Voices like Gloria Steinem, Jane Fonda, and Angela Davis would help bring women's lib to the next level. Throughout the 1970s, activists pushed to change the culture. Several laws were passed that pushed us closer to equality, like Title IX, which ended sex-based discrimination when it came to schooling. The 1974 Equal Credit Opportunity Act ended the whole male control over women's finances thing. On top of that, there was also the creation of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is self-explanatory, in addition to the Civil Rights Act that ensured equal pay, and of course the Supreme Court case, Roe v. Wade. An organization called NOW lobbied for all of that legislation, but their magnum opus was a constitutional amendment called the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment. If passed, it would mean that all of those easy-to-repeal acts would be constitutionally protected, making discrimination based on sex explicitly illegal in our nation's founding document. In order for a constitutional amendment to pass, it needs to make it through both the House and the Senate with a 2/3 majority. Afterwards, it needs to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. And it did do the first half. It made it through Congress with 2/3. It just didn't do the second half. It was short by 2 states of that 3/4 ratification limit. This failure was due to lobbying by people like Ronald Reagan and ironically some women led by conservative groups. Though all these great advancements happened, the patriarchy is a strong force, and in the 1980s there was a heavy backlash to women's lib. It only began to recover in the 90s with the third wave of feminism. It was here that the mindset of many men began to change, especially after the wide coverage of many scandals. The 90s saw many acts passed against domestic violence, towards maternity leave, and towards the economic equality between husband and wife. The struggle continues though. A lot of this progress remains very nebulous, without any real enforced federal standards. Most of the court cases that advance women's rights were never codified, meaning that a lot of them are under threat or have already been repealed. Some people want to roll back the freedoms gained by the women's liberation movement, leading to a 4th wave and possible 5th wave of feminism in the future, but that's probably a video for another time. Thank you all for watching. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Also remember to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and all of our other social medias. Apart from that, I'll see you guys next time. See ya.